Hello and welcome to The Edge, where we'll take an in-depth analysis of today's top stories by looking beyond the edge. We'll bring you not just the facts, but also deep insights into the topics, expert opinions and social media reactions. Let's make a start with our look beyond the edge. Two Senate committees assessing security at the US Capitol in light of January's deadly attack recommended giving the Capitol Police Chief greater authority and developing plans for rapid response by the Pentagon. In a bipartisan report, the committees found that during the January the 6th riot by supporters of then-President Donald Trump, the Pentagon spent hours assessing pleas for help from Capitol Police. The violence left 5 dead. But could the riot have been prevented even if the Capitol Police Chief had had greater authority? Ethiopia's government says that the election on the 21st of June will be a breakaway from previous polls. Critics decry detention of opposition leaders and say that the process is not free and fair. Will delayed polls in Ethiopia mirror those of the past? And Israeli Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit has refused to appear before the High Court of Justice and intervene in the hearing on the Sheikh Jarrah expulsions. Last month, the Supreme Court gave the Attorney General a deadline of the 8th of June to present his legal opinion on the case. How will this affect the developments in Sheikh Jarrah, and how will the international community react? So these are the top 3 stories that we'll be taking a look at today from Beyond the Edge. Let's get started. A Senate investigation of the 6th January insurrection at the US Capitol found a broad intelligence breakdown across multiple agencies, along with widespread law enforcement and military failures that led to the violent attack. But what happened on that day? Our following infographic gives an overview. A broad breakdown in police intelligence and communication has been set out in a US Senate report into the 6th January US Capitol attack.
Two Senate committees assessing security at the US Capitol in light of January's deadly attack recommended giving the Capitol Police Chief greater authority and developing plans for rapid response by the Pentagon. In a statement, US Capitol Police welcomed the report and said that it had already changed its operations, planning to focus on national security, but continued to point to US intelligence failures to warn of the attack. During the January 6th riot by supporters of then-President Donald Trump, the Pentagon spent hours assessing pleas for help from Capitol Police. The Senate Rules and Homeland Security Committees in the report recommended empowering the Capitol Police Chief to ask directly for DC National Guard help in an emergency. The current procedure requires the chief to get a Capitol Police Board emergency declaration first, then Pentagon authorization, though board approval did not happen on January the 6th. The 95-page document noted that Trump had encouraged his supporters to go to the Capitol while a copy of his speech was appended to the report, but it did not discuss his role.
And now joined live from Florida by Bülent Yavuz, who's political analyst. Bülent, thank you for joining us here again today on The Edge. So the report from two committees into the 6th of January riots, storming of the US capitals 5 months ago this week, has been released. What can you tell us about that report?
The report is it's a 95-page report. However, it's one can think that it could be quite conclusive and full of advices, but the report has a lot of missings, and partly because it really requires a bipartisan effort to form a 9/11 type of commission to look after, to search for the events of January 6th. It's not happening. But the report itself, for instance, does not even describe the events as insurrection. It avoids the word because the members, the Republican members who contributed the report vehemently oppose that, although the events definitely showed all kinds of evidences of insurrection as claimed by the Democrats. So there is a major difference between the Democratic angle and the Republican one, and the Republican one is very much dominated by former President Trump, because the party is, I would say, now more of a Donald Trump party than a Republican party that we know of from the days of Ronald Reagan's and George Bush's. Mm-hmm. So that's one issue out there. It's a critical issue. The second problem is that going forward, it doesn't look like there's going to be a 9/11 type of commission because the Republicans oppose it. As Mitch McConnell said, that there are already a number of commissions out there, investigations out there. Why add another one just to clutter? But the country needs a bipartisan and a high-level investigation, as both parties did not argue even a second on not to form after the attacks on 9/11, which brings us the fundamental question. There is a major difference between what happened on January 6th and, let's say, the kind of attacks that happened in the United States, such as 9/11 or Pearl Harbor, where a foreign entity actually attacked the country. This January 6th was, first of all, it's initiated by American citizens in the Congress and in the Senate. So it differs from that angle. And the second, the view of the Republicans is quite, different from the view of the Democrats on how to describe the events. A lot of people who harmed during that day, according to Republicans, are actually against Trump, although all signs indicate, all videos, pictures, slogans, everything that we've seen indicates otherwise. Mm-hmm. So that controversy, the view, as long as it exists, and between the two parties, maybe one possibility to do it is a presidential commission, as some people would like to see it, where the President Biden himself, I would think, would pick and choose the members in a bipartisan manner from folks that country at large trust and form a commission. Whether that is a replacement for a full bipartisan commission or not, that remains another story. But as we see going forward, there's very little chance that there's going to be a full objective view in the Congress about January 6th events, whether it's an insurrection or not.
Which, of course, is a great pity, not just for America, but I think the world would like to see that the United States is in control of everything that goes on in its own country, and because the United States, by many, is seen as an example to the rest of the world. So it's very important for the rest of the world that this is seen to be transparently and openly handled. And it's also very sad to see how although understandable, how people like Mitch McConnell have initially came out very strongly against the attacks on January the 6th, and now is skewing away from investigating them. I assume that this is all political and trying to put the party in the best light before the elections next year.
That is correct. Not only Mitch McConnell, but a few other leaders as well. I mean, I can cite Ted Cruz even, and also Kevin McDonald. But they actually came out on the day of the attack, criticizing President Trump in their own way. And quickly afterwards, they retracted their position. And the key reason for that is, as everyone sees, that the base of the party, the voters of the Republican Party, are overwhelmingly supporting Trump. Mm-hmm. And they would like to see him become president again. And many of them believe that the election is stolen, and the Democrats call it a big lie. The Republicans call it a stolen election. So there is a tremendous gap between the two parties right now when it comes how the election of 2020 is legitimate or not. So that is the core of the problem here.
Mm-hmm. And this, of course, is the great risk for democracy. If you've got people taking such polarized and opposing views, yes, of course, in politics, people disagree with each other, and there are different opinions. But the views that we're seeing in the United States right now are totally opposite, and because there's violence potentially pinned behind that must be very worrying for the people.
Correct, but at the same time, the Republicans have an agenda. They're very focused on regaining the Congress and the Senate in 2022. So that's their issue number one. That's their focus. To do that, they chose to come around, to assemble around Donald Trump. That's a given. That's not going to change until 2022. That's pretty clear. How they're going to play it out, it's becoming clearer. First of all, the Republican Party would like to see that President Biden is not successful in his government until then, mm-hmm. Which means economy. So President Biden would like to pass a very big infrastructure bill. It started with a $2.3 trillion. It went down to $1 trillion to after negotiating with the Republicans, hoping that would go somewhere. But the Republicans right now, their best counter is limited to $300 million, which is a far cry from what President Biden has in his mind, because he wants to see a major overhaul not only in the physical infrastructure such as roads and bridges and so forth, but also on the digital arena and elsewhere. So that is not going to happen through a bipartisan bill. And he keeps negotiating, and finally his party members, such as Bernie Sanders, for instance, said enough is enough. You've negotiated quite long, and we have to really move single-handedly. Now, what does that mean? That means that it will be a process that they're going to initiate as the reconciliation on the budget, which the president is able to do. So it will be a unilateral move, and it would avoid any of the delay tactics in Congress. But when that happens, I mean, we're going back again in the Obama era, where decisions are done by the executive actions and nothing is really done predominantly in Congress. So that's a pity, but that's the ugly face of the politics. So that's the aim. Now, another angle to that strategy is that maybe another tactic would be to change the way in which how people vote on the day of the election. And there's been a series of decisions done on the local level in many of the states to make it much harder for people, for the groups who are traditionally heavily democratic, such as the black population, and therefore improve the chances of Republicans in the election. And furthermore, there are plans to initiate rulings in the states where the election decisions are not decided by a truly independent way, but more of a partisan way. And if the system is such that the party officials decide who won the election, obviously it brings a question whether they're going to be impartial or not. So these things are among the tactics that Republicans wants to push. The reality out there is that Democrats have more votes than Republicans. We all know that. I mean, given everything, it's the case. But the electoral body rules favors Republicans at least in the 21st century right now. So small states have more power. People actually vote in the smaller states. Their vote has more weight than those who vote in big populous states, such as in California. So a vote in Wyoming is, one can argue that it is much more valuable than a vote in California, for that matter. So when you add all these things up, then the question that many people ask is, even with all this, with all these tactics and the strategies in place, is it enough for Republicans to make a winning, to have a winning result in 2022? It's possible, and it is actually likely that they could get back the House and the Senate. But one thing is very critical, that is Joe Biden's performance until then.
Of course.
So if he stumbles, especially in the domestic arena, which means economy, healthcare, and immigration, it might hurt him. Inflation, if it goes to some level, I mean, some say 5%, some say 4% is the threshold. Above that threshold, people are going to start to feel the pain, and it's going to work against them. Immigration is another sore subject that he has not done well, and that's maybe his worst performance so far among all the subject matters that are critical to Americans. Of course, we know that he has a major trip starting today, a 6-day trip to Europe, to NATO, G7, EU. He will talk to President Putin and to President Erdogan, but the conversation with President Putin is highly publicized in the United States. There's been criticism by some folks, including some in his party, that maybe it was too premature. However, what President Biden would like to see is that he wants to combine his domestic agenda with international agenda, which means that, especially when it comes to infrastructure, he would like to see that starting with the UK and then with the other democratic partners, they remain on the same page, both in the environmental issues as well as on the clean energies and clean technologies, as well as the technology area, such as artificial intelligence and elsewhere. So if he can form that unison, he would avoid China getting a stronghold, especially in Europe. That's what he wants to do. That's how he approaches the challenge to China. And also all the cyber attacks, etc., that's happening and initiated by, let's say, some renegade facilities or entities that are supported or harbored by Russia. He wants to have, it does not want to increase the bar against Russia. He wants to come to some agreeable terms with Russia. It's obvious. So, but everything goes back to his power, political power in the country. Means that in 2022 elections, Democrats should turn out as winners. That's very, very important now, because if that doesn't happen, the rest of the 2 years of his presidency is going to be much more difficult. Obviously, that he'd lose the Congress and the Senate. And then going forward, maybe 2024, it is highly possible right now as we speak that Donald Trump is going to be against running him, or whoever is going to run. That's also another issue. Whether he's going to run it again or not is not really clear. But nevertheless, it's either Trump or someone who is supporting the principle that is set by Donald Trump is going to be a Democrat's opponent in 2024.
So Joe Biden's got plenty of opportunities to prove himself or to trip up, and it will be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how he manages the events of January the 6th, and whether he manages, whether he has the inspiration to pull that round to take any action about that. Bülent, thank you so much for joining us today here on The Edge and giving us your analysis of both the January the 6th and current events in the US. Now, late last month, Senate Republicans blocked legislation to set up a bipartisan commission that would have the power to force witnesses, possibly including Donald Trump, to testify under oath about what happened that day. Republican opponents said that the Senate committee's probe, as well as ongoing prosecutions, were enough investigation. However, the Senate committees said that they did not get all the information they had sought from several agencies. We'll see the effects of this report in the coming days. But for now, let's move on to our next topic to discuss the election in Ethiopia. The conflict in Ethiopia between the country's defense force and the Tigray People's Liberation Front has left hundreds of thousands of people displaced and thousands more dead. How did the conflict start? Let's find out from our infographic. Ethiopia is gearing up for what's expected to be its first fully democratic election in the wake of ethnic violence and a brutal war in the northern Tigray region.
Ethiopia's election is less than 2 weeks away, but various insecurity and logistical woes, as well as questions over representation, threaten to overshadow the country's already twice delayed national polls. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed promised Ethiopians that they would be able to shape the country's destiny with their vote. However, as bloodshed in the northern Tigray region and instability elsewhere keep taking a toll on civilians, and as candidates slated to provide Abiy with the stiffest electoral challenge remain behind bars, enthusiasm amongst some Ethiopians continues to wane. The June 21st polls for the 547 seats in Ethiopia's House of Representatives will be the 6th since the overthrow of the Mengistu Haile Mariam's communist government in 1991. However, they will also be the first not featuring the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front four-party alliance, which was declared victor in the previous 5 contests, including the last one in 2015, when it secured all seats in a process marred by allegations of voter intimidation.
And I'm joined from Minneapolis by Edo Dewano, who's an Ethiopian activist. Edo, thanks so much for joining us again here today on The Edge. So Ethiopia is going to the polls in 2 weeks' time, going to elections. These elections, I believe, are delayed from last year. Could you tell us about why they're delayed? And I believe that they were again delayed. And why are they happening now?
That is quite true. Initially, the election was supposed to happen last August. However, as we know, due to the COVID pandemic, it was very impossible for the government to go ahead and then get the election going. And for that reasoning, they kind of pushed it farther away. And they were planning to do it sometimes in the May of this year. And now, hopefully, they're planning to have it on June the 21st. So things are going as such. The reason why they keep pushing it forward is due to logistic shortcomings and whatnot.
We talk about the logistic shortcomings. A large part of Ethiopia, as I understand it, the Tigray region in the north of the country is, for want of a better expression, involved in a civil war at the moment. How is it possible to conduct fair and free elections in that sort of circumstance?
Elections is not happening in the Tigray region as of right now due to the current situation in the ground. And however, the elections plan to be held elsewhere throughout the country. And that is the plan that's going ahead. Even one of the main conflict causes where the TPLF and Tigray region had their election in a time when the national government have postponed the election due to the COVID that I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. And that has been a defining point for the federal government for the Tigray region to go ahead and hold its own regional election then. But this time around, due to the conflict and the ongoing situation on the ground, election is not happening in the Tigray region. However, it is happening on the rest of the country.
Well, which is interesting because, in a sense, that underpins the Tigrayans' rationale for holding an election before. If they're now excluded from a national election, doesn't that give the TPLF the opportunity to say, yes, we're operating separately from the rest of the country, so therefore we have the right to go ahead and continue to rule in our region?
That is one way to look at it. However, one thing that needs to be highlighted is the fact that TPLF is a group of regime that was on power, who have ruled the country for 27 years without no sense of democracy. However, right after their disposal from power, they acted as if they care for democracy and choose to go against the federal government of postponing the election. So out of nowhere, they're acting as if they care for democracy and rule of law and holding their election in the right time. But at this point, they are not able to govern. The environment is very unstable, and I don't think they have any moral ground in which they claim to rule over the group of people or their people that they claim to represent, because they're causing the people chaos. They're destabilizing the area. Even the current administration that's being put in place by the government has not been able to govern due to the fact of the TPLF are continuing to attack and create chaos in the region. So it is very much impossible, and then I don't think they have any moral ground in which they claim such.
Has this played into any of the campaigning at all for the parties that are running in this election?
What do you mean?
Stabilizing the region to stabilize Ethiopia as a united country.
Absolutely, it is a hope of all opposition parties and even the ruling party to make sure that the region of the country is more stabilized and rebuilt and everything put in place as it was. And hopefully the people of the region would elect their officials and be a part of the functioning country.
Now, Ethiopia has been holding democratic elections for a long time, but this election is different because of the parties that are taking part in it. I believe until several years ago there was a four-party alliance. The Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front that was in existence. That's now no longer in existence. How is that? Could you explain to us the field of parties in Ethiopia and how the absence of this alliance will affect this round of elections?
Actually, you were speaking of the EPDRF, which was fully dominated by the TPLF at the time. And after the reform, the government came to power. That's like in 2018, the EPDRF dissolved, and then they formed a new merging group called Prosperity Party. So initially, the EPDRF was pretty much a merge of different groups from different regions that became the ruling party for the last 2+ decades. And now the current ruling party is named Prosperity Party, which pretty much the entire group except the TPLF, who refused to be part of that group, and that left and choose to go and pick up an arm and struggle against the remaining group of force that's currently really leading the country. So that has not been, we are experiencing a new reform, a reform that many expected to be more of democratic, to be more of where environments are for democracy is more nurturing. Therefore, the expectation is quite different than the EPDRF. This is the new Prosperity Party that come with reform agendas, that opening its platform and whatnot. So there's a lot that's expected than the previous elections. People are expecting a lot. The world pretty much is looking into Ethiopia right now to see if this reform is actually tangible, or is it just political statements that was made in the past. So there's a lot of expectation. So we'll wait to see what happened on June 21st.
So these are the reforms that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was put in place to bring about three years ago. Are the people happy with what is achieved so far?
Well, people have different way of looking at things. People expected different results. However, one thing that we have to underline is that this is a reform government. A reform is not a revolution. It is pretty much the ongoing process where leadership comes to position of power, and undoing the previous undemocratic culture itself is a very, very difficult job, I suppose. However, yes, time has gone and people expected a change to come, and change is in the process. And nothing can be done all of a sudden. As the saying goes, Rome was not built overnight. And there's a lot of challenges. There's a critical challenges transiting from a regime style of leadership to a democratic one. And in the process of doing this, as you already know, that Ethiopia is experiencing internal conflict. There's been a challenge within the party, within the whole system. And from outside, of course, the Nile Dam issue is also another challenge. So this reform leadership is experiencing a difficulty, great challenges from domestic as well as international. So it is battling itself through the process. And we'll wait to see what the people will say on June 21st. As of right now.
Right. Now, we know that Ethiopia is made up as many different ethnic groups. I think as many as 80 different ethnic groups. But some of those in opposition to the government, I believe, have recently been imprisoned. Is that right? Can some people who would have been standing in this election haven't been enabled to stand? And that leaves some of the groups, like the Omoro, I'm reading here, disenfranchised. So how does that work?
Well, what happens pretty much is initially the group that you mentioned are the Oromo. The majority of Ethiopians are the Oromo population that plays a huge role in the country, political, economical, and all affairs. It is true that there's a group that came in from outside per Abiy's invite, pretty much rallying behind the popular uprising that took place in 2016, 17, 18, that brought this change. And then in the process, that is every exiled political groups came in to participate, to engage in the democratic process in bringing the new Ethiopia pretty much go forward. However, in process, political situations took place, and there was here and there chaos that took place, disagreement, and then people that came in the name of peace choose to pick up arms. And then there's a dispute of how things should be, and there is pretty much a mistrust that was among the group that came in from outside versus those that are driving the reform, who were part of the previous government or the regime itself. However, at this point, yes, there are individuals that are public figures that are being imprisoned, and that have their own case of pretty much legal due process that's taking place right now. However, yes, it is a setback for the Oromo population and not to be able to see who they wanted to see in the election process. However, what people need to be mindful is that it's not necessarily individuals, but an agenda that opposition's party presents forward, agenda that can lead the country to greater good, for greater pretty much advancement. And people need to focus on the policies rather than organizations that people are following. So there is that, and then I'm glad that you point that out, because that's like it is a huge population segment that is set back from this. However, but it is what it is, and this is the politics, and people compete based on ideas, and there's a challenge, and this is a country that's undergoing reform. Things are not perfect, but things are pedaling forward regardless. But it is better to come on the round table and discuss matters instead of going into unnecessary armed conflict or armed struggle. I think national dialogue would have been better, but that was not being able to be achieved. However, I think the best way out is pretty much to sit down and talk and pave the best way out for the citizens of the whole Ethiopian population.
Thank you so much for explaining that to us. You're quite right that we do look, and of course, with the experience that we have of our own situations when we're looking at another place, whatever that experience is. So it's quite normal that we should do that. But at the same time, that's why it's good to talk to you, so that we can begin to understand better and the local differences and the local needs. Eduardo Duano, thank you so much for joining us today here again on The Edge. Thank you. With much of Ethiopia's political opposition out of the race, some observers fear that the polls could heighten resentment towards the government. In May, the European Union cancelled plans to send election observers to Ethiopia, ostensibly due to communications issues. It came on the heels of a call by 5 US senators to postpone the polls that they described as not currently on track to meet international standards for freedom, fairness and transparency. Well, the coming weeks will show if the elections will go ahead. In fact, just another 10 days. And how will it affect the ongoing crisis in the Tigray region? And now let's move on to our final topic to talk about the Sheikh Jarrah case. Sheikh Jarrah is home to around 2,800 Palestinian residents and includes many diplomatic missions and well-known landmarks. Our following infographic gives the main historic facts. Israel's Attorney General says he has no intention of intervening in the High Court cases pending to halt the eviction of Palestinian families from occupied East Jerusalem, leading to fears that there may be no end to ethnic cleansing in the city.
Israel's Attorney General, Avichai Mandelblit, informed the Supreme Court that he would not be intervening in the legal proceedings of the Sheikh Jarrah case, in which Palestinian families in occupied East Jerusalem are facing forced expulsion, paving the way for the court to deliver a ruling widely expected to be in favor of the Israeli occupiers. Last month, the Supreme Court gave the Attorney General a deadline of June the 8th to present his legal opinion on the case. Mandelblit's decision leaves the Supreme Court free to decide whether to hear the Palestinian families' appeals of 2 lower court verdicts that demands them to leave their homes. Meanwhile, Palestinian families in Sheikh Jarrah rejected Mandelblit's explanation of his non-interference, stating that their case was not a legal matter, but a matter of forced expulsion. During Israeli airstrikes, hundreds of people were killed, including children and women. May have ensured that residents in Sheikh Jarrah can remain in theirs, at least for now.
Israeli forces continue to storm the Sheikh Jarrah neighbourhood and assault Palestinian families, beating them and firing tear gas and sound bombs at them. In recent months, the Sheikh Jarrah neighbourhood has seen a series of sit-ins by Palestinians to protest against Israeli orders for them to vacate their homes, which they described as a continuation of the ethnic cleansing that began with the Nakba in 1948. Coming days will show if the Israeli forces' assaults will continue and how the international community will react. Well, our 2 analysts provided their insights on today's top stories. Let's have a roundup of what they had to say. And before closing our programme, let's have a look at social media to hear your voices and reactions on today's top stories with Miriam Carlson.
Hello, we are taking a look at social media today, and we are staying in Jarrah, where we are looking at comments with the hashtag #ShareJarrah. So let's take a look. And let's take a look at the first one today, which is coming from, let's see, Mohammed Al-Bahlul. He's saying that the generation that could lead the path for freedom of Palestine, the twins Mohammed and Muna Al-Kurd from Sheikh Jarrah of Jerusalem, Palestine. And moving on, Farah is saying, how can we sleep in calmness when children in Gaza can't sleep due to Israeli bombing? And moving on, Lana Tatu is saying, eyes on Sheikh Jarrah. Let there be no mistake, the court will approve ethnic cleansing. Israeli law is colonial law, and the Israeli court is colonial court. They're not neutral, and they're not there to deliver justice. They're there to advance settler colonialism and Israeli apartheid. And we are staying in Sheikh Jarrah for the video of the day, which is showing a story of a Palestinian family living there. Let's take a look.
Ever since I opened my eyes to the world, I have been hearing about court cases and being threatened with eviction. This started in 1972. I wasn't even born yet when the cases in the court started. My name is Reem Hamad. I was born and raised in this house in Sheikh Jarrah. Our house is our basic right as human beings, and The thought of not having this house kills me inside. Being uprooted from your house is just totally unfair, inhumane, and unjust. To me, my home is where I find my peace of mind. My home is where I find people I love, people I cherish. My home is where all my dreams and hopes started and grew. My home is where I hope to be and stay and die. We are supposed to love each other. This world was built for everybody. I don't see why we should have this much hatred in our hearts for each other.
And with this touching story, this is all for me for now, and back to Andy.
And that's all for this episode of The Edge with me, Andy Boyns. Stay tuned as we'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth analysis on the top stories and a look beyond the edge.